Hey, welcome back. In this chapter, we're going to be looking at data sets and tables. This is your Excel chapter 4 entitled Data Sets and Tables. The textbook goes through a case study for a furniture store and looking at large data. So what we're planning to do in this chapter is have a look at large data sets and how Excel can manage them. And you see data sets in every discipline out there. So it doesn't matter if you're in accounting or finance, marketing, computers, whatever, there's always large data sets that you need to be able to know how to manipulate and manage. So that's the focus of today. Now, some of the learning objectives that we're going to cover is how to freeze the rows and the columns of these data sets to be more manageable, how to print large data sets, which is important. Even though we're not maybe printing them as a physical copy as much anymore, we can send them as a PDF and still make them a lot easier for people to read when we're exporting the data to whoever needs it. Understanding why we're doing this and what it can actually do for us. And Excel has such an incredible amount of powerful tools to look at data to help us answer questions. So the objective, one of the key objectives in my lectures is to not only show you how the tables work, but how to apply that to a more meaningful way to get meaningful answers and to start thinking about the data and how we can extract information from it. So designing and creating tables and how we lay them out and how we display them is part of that. I don't do a whole lot of the table styles. I'll let you guys go through that. That's more the formatting of the tables. The book and the simulations go through that quite detailed. I will be looking at structured formulas again. I like to do formulas in my lectures, so I'll be introducing some formulas in here. How do you organize the data, sort it, you filter it, manipulate it to get the answers that you want. So we also do things like how to, do aggregate type of calculations, adding things up, how to present it in a conditional format. This is a great thing. And even looking at how to create your own rules for conditional formatting. So those are the learning objectives. All right, so now what I want to do is open up the actual book example. So what I've done is I'm going to provide all the students with this data set right here. And it's entitled the Warehouse Incident Data. This would be like a typical warehouse, like Amazon's warehouse, or there's warehouses all over. So it's not that you're working in the warehouse. You could be working in the office, looking at the data, collecting the data, manipulating, analyzing, and looking for answers in the data. So the first thing you need to do when you look at large data sets is understand what you're actually looking at. So in this data set right here, this is a particular warehouse that somebody has collected all of the accidents or injuries that have occurred in this particular warehouse over a fixed period of time. So if you take a look at the top here, it says the dates. Now these are called columns, but in a data structure, sometimes these are referred to as a field of data. So this would be the date field. This would be the injury location. Where was the person injured? As an incident, maybe they were injured in there's multiple locations. They don't know, not available. Maybe it was their eyes that were injured, or their legs. So somebody might have got, in this case, someone got burnt maybe on their hands and their arms, so it was a multiple injury. The next field is what gender. So they have broke it down into males and females in this particular data set. They've also broken it down by the age group. What age were they? Now, you might think, well, why are they breaking it down like this? Well, they want to figure out like who is injuring themselves more, in which age group, maybe what type of incidences they were. So this was multiple injury, and it was very specifically, it was a burn. This one here, there was no real identified location of the injury, but it was in a vehicle. The next field is days lost. How many days did they lose? This person got burnt, but they didn't take a day off. This person was in a looks like some kind of vehicle accident and took half a day off, and so on. The next field is what plant or what warehouse. So, and these are different locations that Amazon or whoever this warehouse happens to be have warehouses. So they just collect all those incidences. Reporting type, it was a near miss. I'm not sure how you can be a burn and a near miss. but that's the reporting type. So there's different types: lost time, near miss, first aid was lost time, and as things start to repeat, medical claim came in as well. So you can see here that there's different types. This is great information. When did it happen? Was it in the afternoon, sometime during the day? Was it in the morning? Why would that be significant? Well, we can use data like this to collect it and say, well, we can find out that most of the accidents were happening in the afternoon, for example. And if that's the case, then maybe we can make corrections in the afternoon to help prevent that. What department was it? So in the warehouse, they've got the painting, fabricating, administration, and so on, all these different departments within inside of the warehouse. So we can also help track down where is the incidents happening, mostly in which department. All right, now what did it cost for this particular? Well, in this first case, it cost $222. Now they don't break it down by saying what, but probably because it got burnt, they needed to maybe call in, I don't know, maybe they called the ambulance and there was some paramedics and there was a cost to that. I'm not sure, but there was a cost associated with that incident. Now cost, that's when companies get very concerned, is when people lose time at work and they start costing money. So it's a double negative. So in this case here, they lost half a day of wages, plus it cost them a lot of money for this car accident. Kind of makes sense. Here's someone who got an eye injury. It was a cut, which is... sounds pretty bad. They didn't take any time off and it didn't cost them anything. So it was a small cut for some reason. And it happened on Friday. The next field is what month and what year was it? Well, and if you look here, now this is interesting. It's January 1st of 2020. Well, January 1st of 2020, this data has actually been repeated. So we've got data that's been entered in twice. It's unnecessary. So this data right here is not that useful. In fact, the data here, someone's logged in what day that was, but in fact, we can actually calculate what day of the week that was with a function called day of the week of this one right here. So we could verify that that was correct, and we could also see what month and what year as well. So this information right here is repetitive data as I see it. Now, when I look at data, I always look for things that we might be able to extract or extrapolate. And I think the only thing we can do with this data set is really look at the date and extract what day of the week, what was the actual, was it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, what month and what year. And by collecting that information, we could then go in and say, okay, what number of accidents happened in the first month of the year or the second month of the year, and so on. So it's really important when you're looking at data to really clearly understand what you're looking at and see if the first thing you should probably do is check to see if there's any additional data that you can create. So to get started here, I could actually just insert and create, the day of the week. So I just go day of the week. All right. And I want to calculate that. All right, so there's a function for that. There are a lot of functions under the formula tab here, specifically related around things like even date and time. So if you look at this function right here, it shows you all of the different options. You can see here, there's one here called work day. The work day, so we could try that one. There's also one here called the weekday. So it comes up with a number of 1 to 7. This one here comes up with whether, what day of the week it is. So you could pick either or. Depends on how you want to structure your data. I'll try this weekday. And we know Wednesday is starting, Sunday is technically the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So this should be equal to 4. So all I want to do is inside of here, I want to put my first argument in as the date. So I'm going to put the date in here and it comes up with this large number here. Well, that's actually the date value of January 1st of 2020. And it says that's the 4th day of the week, so which is Wednesday, right? And we can verify, yep, that's Wednesday. So Friday would be, so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That would be, should be 6. So if I drop down here, that should be 6, and it is 6. So the next one should be 6, and I'm pretty confident that that's correct now. So once I've got a number, I can associate that if I need to code it or something like that with the actual weekday. Now, if I wanted to put in a weekday, I could do another calculation to do that. But all right, let's do month. And back under here, let's look at, is there an option here for calculating the month? There it is here. Let's select the the date, and we know that should be January, and that's the first month. Perfect. So January is the first. So that's the same. And we could do the same thing for the year. Now, you might think, well, why am I going through and doing this process? And I'm doing it because I'm actually verifying that the data here is correct. So you might think, okay, sorry, that should have been, I think, year. So I'm talking and trying to code at the same time. And obviously that's not working. So I got to be a little more careful here when I do that. And you can see that. There we go. So I'm going to drop down, and this should be 1 in 2020, and then 1 in 2020 again. All right, so it looks like it's working. So I'll go all the way down. Let's check another data point right down here. And let's go 8, 8. Okay, it looks like all the data is correct. So what I'm pointing out here is that the data that they entered into the original data set was manually entered, which is the first thing I would tell them not to do. They don't have to type in the day of the week, the month, or the year. All they have to do is type in what was the date. So that would save on data input. So one of my first recommendations to the the creator of the collecting this data input would be that that is non-essential data. So I wanted to show how that works, and you should always be looking for data. So I'm going to take that data for now, and I'm just going to hide it because I'll keep it there, but I don't really need it. So I just selected those and I hid them. You can see up top here that there's a little parallel line up here that allows me to open those back up. So I'm going to just hide that one again, and we're getting back to our original data. All right, so now what I want to do is, if you read the instructions here, it says using the warehouse incident data set, that's the one right here, create questions that support the data. Now, what that means is we want to use things like Excel and their functions, like I did here to calculate the day of the week, the month, and the year, to help support that. And then once you've written out your questions, you've looked at some questions, we want to take those questions and write formulas to provide the answers. So one of the things you might want to just look at is a general overall, what information could I pull out of this? Well, I mean, at a very, very cursory level, I could say, what did the incidents cost us overall during this entire data set? So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. You can see here that there's actually 500 and about 15 or 14, I guess, 514 records. I could simply go back up into the Home tab, click on the Editing, and click AutoSum. And that would go back up to M3 to M516, okay? And that says that these incidents cost the company $718,000 strictly in costs. That has nothing to do with lost wages. Now, lost wages are a lot more difficult to calculate from this because we don't know what they're getting paid for each of these people. That data is not provided, and we can't even extrapolate that data. So that's not there, but we could say, well, how many days were actually lost? And we could say, wow, we lost 378.5 days on average if you total them all up, and that's lost productivity, and it costs money. So you can see how a company would be very interested in looking at where are these accidents occurring and how can we help reduce them. And what the objective of this entire exercise is to reduce this number and to reduce this number and to make it safer for everybody that works at the company. Of course, that's the number one thing, is making it safe for everybody at the company. All right. Now, here in British Columbia, we have a whole a government organization called WorkSafe BC, and this is actually dedicated to just looking after all the companies in British Columbia just to try to implement safety procedures and safety protocols to help reduce these risks, because there are insurance processes that they provide and they want to reduce that. All right, so we're going to come up with some questions. So one of the questions was, well, right here you can see that there's a lot of money. That's like, the question could be, how much money are we spending on incidents costs? How many days have been lost? Those are two good questions. And we just answered those two questions with very simple functions. The sum function right here. All right, so what other questions can we ask of the data? Well, another question might be something like, what day of the week has the highest incident rate? We can see here that the days right here, Wednesday we had 1, Friday, Saturday. Well, by just looking at this data, it's really hard to come up with that answer. So what we want to do is we want to look at the data and see how can we reorganize it to come up with the answer. So what I want to do is come up with that question. Basically, the question that I want would be something like, what day of the week? Okay, so that could be a question right there. I'll just type that in right there. Is what day of the week has the highest incident rate? That could be a question from management. Why would they want to know that? Does it matter? Well, it does matter because they could find out that Fridays might be a very high incident rate. If that's the case, well, companies might want to do something different by playing different music in the warehouses. They might want to have a braking system different. They may want to put on extra safety measures. Maybe people are getting tired by the end of the week. Maybe that's why it's coming up. So that information would be very helpful, that they could implement some kind of policy in the company to help reduce that incident rate. We could do the same thing of which month has the highest rate. So that might have something to do with weather. Like in the middle of the winter, there might be more incidents than in the summer, maybe because they're opening up the doors in the warehouses more often to keep the cold out. Who knows what the circumstances are? With that said, we might want to know what incidences occur, what are the highest incidents based on the plants. Now, this is a really good question because each plant or each warehouse has a total amount of incidences. Now, we could calculate who has the highest, and we could put up an initiative to the managers to try to reduce accidents by giving an incentive. If they lower their costs, they get a bonus or some type of thing like that. So they would be incentivized to try to do that. So these are kind of ideas. Now, what I want you to do, and this is really the important thing that I'm trying to get you to do in my lecture portions, is not just teach you how to use Excel, but is to get you to think about the data and see, is there any other questions that you can come up with? I came up with about 10 different questions that I could generate from that. And what I want to do is I'm going to go through those by showing you how to implement formulas to answer those questions. But before I do that, let's go through the learning objectives of the large data sets. Now, to get started with, there's a tab at the top here called Data, and it's dedicated pretty much to doing what we're talking about here. It has all these tools to do with data manipulation. So that's one area. Now, there is another area under the Home tab. Now, because this is so common, we do have options for sorting data. So I'm going to go over here under editing. You can see here there is an option to sort and filter data because, again, this is very common. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the data ready to be organized. So I'm going to start off by just removing this. And you guys I've provided this data set so you guys can follow along with this. And what I want to do is I want to be able to sort my data. So my first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to column A2. I'm going to go back into my Home tab, and I'm going to go over to the editing and look at my sorting and filtering options. Now, this could also be applied under data. Under data, there should be some data tools here for sorting alphabetically, A to Z, Z to A, sort, filter, and there's some other advanced filter features as well that we'll look at later. So if I just go under here, just click on sort, you'll notice it's sorted from the earliest date here. Actually, just sorted in a random order here. It didn't even really, oh, there you go. So you can see it grabbed the total at the bottom. So it's not really helping me out a whole lot here. All right, so oh, actually it did. It said January 1st. This is the 3rd, 4th. Okay, so it is organizing. Let's say I want to organize all the genders. Well, I could do that by just clicking on this one right here, and all the females are together and all the males are together by going alphabetically. And I could put the groups together by sorting them. That's pretty handy feature. But what's even handier is if you go back to the date field and click on filter. And you'll notice what filter does is it puts a control onto each of the titles of the fields. And this gives me control over individual fields. So now I can sort according to the oldest date to the newest date. If there's colors, I can actually pull out individual data. So not only does it sort, but it filters. So if I wanted to, I could pull out all the data from, let's say, 2021. And I could say, okay, there we go. And then if I go down to the bottom, down here, I could put on a total down here, and let's just total up the answer, which is by going into Home, Editing, Auto Sum, and it comes up with, so just for 2021. So the question might be, how much money did we spend in 2021? Or how much did we spend in 2020? So since 2020 is over, let's do that because that year has been completed. So let me just go back in here, 2021. And you can do fractional. You can actually go down to the individual month. So you have exact control over the data from that little filtering tool. And you'll notice that there's a little filtering icon that pops up. And then it tells us down here at the bottom that you can see here I'm scrolling. I don't even know what column I'm in. And I'm going up and down. Okay, so for 2020, there was $327,000 plus in injuries. Great number to know. And then we can compare it from year to year if we want later on. All right, so you can see I'm going up and down, up and down. So I don't like to scroll up and lose my title. So one of the learning objectives is to take that top row, rows 1 and 2, and lock them in place. By doing that, I can select row 3, and everything above it I can lock by going into my View tab and say I want to freeze the pane. So I want to freeze the pane right here. And there's some options. And if you look, there's a very thin line there now. And that means when I scroll down, my headings are there. So now I know which my fields are. This is a great tool. Like I can go down to the bottom. But I'm still going up and down and up and down and up and down. It's driving me crazy. So another option you can do is down here at the bottom, you can create a bottom type of window. And to do that, we could go up here and we can basically split. And by splitting, what we've done now, okay, let me try that again. Did I split? Oh, I split it way up here, I guess is what I did. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to unclick the split. And I still have my, now I got to go back here. What I got to do is I got to take off my select all again. So I have to look at all the data. All right, and then first of all, I've got to freeze my pane first of all. And then down below here, I will create a split window. All right, and that allows me to create the split window. Now, they're not allowing me to do both at the same time. And that was just a behavior I had forgotten about a long time ago. So what I'm going to do here is show you how the window works. So I've got the window split here, and I can just select that row and go ahead and just select the window split. Now you think, well, what did it really do? Well, it creates one window view here, and then it allows me to create another window view down here. So that allows me to go down to the bottom, down right here, and actually calculate what the total is. So if I make a change now, if I go back up into my dates, for example, and I filter out just 2020, it automatically calculates. So I can get my answers a lot easier without having to scroll up and down. If you have large data sets, this is pretty much mandatory. So I click on the filter. Let's try a different year. Let's go back into 2021, and it's a lot less because there's less records. All right, so I can get my answers. So if someone wants to ask me those questions, I can organize my screen so that I can rapidly look at the answers. And that's by using this tab here called View, and using the freeze pane at the top, and using this option to split your screen to look at 2 separate parts at the same time. Very handy. All right, let's have a look at printing this. If I was to print this, one way we could look at this is go down to the bottom right corner of your screen down here and look at how the page layout would actually look. So right now you can see here, it puts on like a page number when you select this option right here on the bottom right corner of what it would look like when you print it off. It would be an absolute mess if you did this, as you can see right here. So to get started on this one here, what I would recommend is let's go back to our original. And we could either do that with this second option. The second option also shows us how it would be printed as well in an input way. And this one right here is more of the page output view, what it would look like if you send it to the printer or a PDF file. And then this view right here is our normal view. So to get started here, I'm going to turn off all of my options here to freeze the panels and all that stuff. And let's see here, did I do that right? Okay, well, I put an extra panel here, so I'm going to unfreeze everything. There we go. So we're back to normal. All right, I'm going to take my dates and I want to print everything. All right, so if you're printing a very large worksheet, I'm going to take out my question here. And what would it look like if I just printed it out like this? So there'd be 1 of 13 pages, there's 2 of 14. So you can see here there's a lot of pages. This would look absolutely terrible if you printed it out. I mean, this would be, how many sheets would this be? That'd be 20 24 pages to print that out. So we want to reduce that, make it a lot easier for someone to watch and read it. So now to print large sheets, we want to go to the page layout and organize it for the page layout and the print layout. So to get started, I think it's always good to start with your margins. You guys probably did margins in the Word course, so you know how this works. I'd probably set these down to about 1/2 inch each, but it really depends on, you know, manipulating it to get it exactly to fit. So I try to get the largest I can. Now, I don't have any headers or footers, so I'm not worried about that. Horizontally and vertically allows you to organize your data so it's perfectly centered. So I'm going to go I'm just going to go horizontally at the top, and I think that's good for now. So I'm going to just say OK. Now, the other thing I can do is my orientation. You can see I've got a portrait mode right now. I could go landscape. And as soon as I go landscape, that really helped. You can see I almost got all of it on one page. Now, I can probably get it all on one page by just simply highlighting all my rows here and auto. Now, I also had those earlier ones that I probably don't need. So I'm going to take those 3 out, delete those. And also, I probably don't need as much space. So I could go down and just kind of size these up individually. And it looks like that's what I'm going to have to do. Now, if you size it too much, you can also drop down and then also drop and wrap around like this so that it fits. The incidents report, I could probably drop that. And the days lost, of course. You can see I'm almost there already. And you probably don't want to cut it off too short. Oh, this one, incident cost, would definitely be a good one. Your months, okay, that would be easy. And you can see now it fits. It fits perfectly on one landscaped page. So I went from 24 pages, now I'm down to 14 pages. And it looks like the total at the bottom is on that one. Although this, I guess I could probably take that out and this out as well. All right, take the totals out. Perfect. So I'm at 14 pages now. That's a lot better than 24 pages. So it's a matter of just working on your page layout of margins, the orientation. Paper size is pretty much fixed for most printers, and most people use 8.5 by 11. The print area means you could actually set the print area. If I wanted to, I could actually just highlight exactly what I wanted to print. But the thing with, like right now, I just printed this one little one right there, which I don't want. So I'm going to undo that. But I could just print page 1, and I could just simply highlight page 1, for example, and say, let's set that as the print area. And that would be the only thing that gets printed. So that's a nice feature right there. Page breaks has to do with where do you want the pages to break. You can actually change those. So in fact, you can grab this and move this up 1 or 2. You can adjust these yourself. So you can see here, if I want to force the data to be on a very specific page, I can do that using this page break. Background, well, we can put on some samples in the background. I won't do that. And page title as well. All right, if you expand and open this up, there's a really very, very handy feature that you can set up so that on page 2 and page 3 and page 4, you want the titles. So if you take a look right now, only the first page has the first two the titles, but I want both of those to be on every page. Now to do that, I can go to this little dialog expansion box, select my sheet, I believe, and say what rows to repeat at the top. And all I want to do is select rows 1 and rows 2. So it writes it in as absolutely row 1 and absolute row 2 will be printed on every single page. So now if I print preview, what does that look like? It shows me that I've got my warehouse incident report here on page 1 of 16. I go to page 2 and I'm repeating that at the top of every page. This is really essential, and that's why I show students how to do it, because if you're ever printing out data sets like this, you definitely want it to do that. All right, so that we're getting a lot closer with how that works, and also this would be pretty acceptable, I think, for most people to print out. So I've got this set up now nice and neat. I'm going to go back to my normal view and carry on with the rest of the class. Now, also you'll notice when I've done that, it puts in a very faint dotted line that shows you where the page breaks are. So if I do expand this in the future, it will change or manipulate that. So I would probably want to save this, make sure I don't lose my data at that point. All right, so the very first level of data sets is by using this filter feature right here, which I said you could simply turn on by putting on the filter under sort right here, under sort your data and apply the filter. Now, another way to do it is if I took that off, I can create and go to the next step. The next step up is by converting the data into an actual table. So that means it takes all the existing data right here. So I'm going to start off at A2 because I want my active point in the top left corner of the entire data set. And under the insert, I want to insert all my data as a table. Now, it's a little, I would prefer if they put the table tool right here. In fact, it might be even in here somewhere. But it can be found easily under the insert, under table right here. And there's different types of tables. So we start off with a regular two-dimensional table. Later, we'll look at pivot tables and then even 3D type of table tools. So we'll start off with just a simple table. And when I click on that, it comes up and says, okay, where does your table start? Well, it doesn't start at A1, it starts at A2. So you got to really be careful here to make sure it's A2. My table has headings, yes it does. And I click on OK. Perfect. So what it does is it takes the data and it converts it into a table object. So this data is actually sitting on top now of the worksheet. It's not in the worksheet. It may look like that it's in the worksheet, but it's considered an actual object on top of the sheet. And it gives us the same repetitive ability as my filter did right here. So this is a better way of sorting and looking at your data because it gives you additional features. Now, you'll notice that on the pull down, this is the same as filter that we just looked at. But if you look on the menu at the top here, it's got table design. It's got an entire ribbon dedicated to just manipulating data. Like, for example, styles. If you want to change the styles as the book tells you about, you can select one of these. I'll just leave it at blue for now. It also allows for a header at the top, which I won't turn off, or a total row at the bottom. So, which is kind of nice because if you click on total row at the bottom, it puts a row at the bottom here, which becomes a dynamic tool. So what I can do is I can simply go underneath and answer those questions like how many days were lost. And when I do, I get a aggregate list of all of the functions, the basic functions of summing, what's the minimum, what's the maximum, what's the count, etc. So count would just simply be how many records, which I know there's 514 records. What I want to do is sum them up. So I know that I've lost 378.5 days of work. The other one I'd sum up would be this one right here, and that would be a sum. Months, it wouldn't make sense to say, well, total up the months. Even those are numbers, it would make no sense whatsoever. I think I've talked about this in another video. You've really got to be careful when you do formulas that it makes sense. And those are pretty much the only two. I guess a person could go in here and say, well, let's just count up how many records, and there's 514. Okay, there's 514 incident reports in this time. There are 378.5 days missed. There are $718,017 that were cost us in incidents. That's great data. What about this one here? Does it make sense to total up the number of years? No, of course not. It makes no sense. I'm just going to hit the delete key and get rid of that. So the total function inside. Now you'll notice when I click off of the table, you lose the table option here. So if I click back on it, it comes back because this is an actual object. I'm like clicking on almost like a picture that I can manipulate. All right. Now from here, I can start doing other features that the table tool provides. Okay, so what are some other options here? All right, so one thing you can do is you can actually give this table a name. So like we can give an individual cell a name right here, up here in the table design, we can give it a name. And I could call this, warehouse underscore data. Now, you see I use that underscore because they don't allow you to use spaces in these things. So don't put in a space. So that means that in the future, if I ever want to refer to this table, I can refer to this table as a warehouse data. Just like that cell right there, if I wanted to, I could actually name that cell right here. Right, currently it's A3, but I could give it its own unique name in the future. Another unique feature of this is how to find duplicate records or remove duplicates. Now, this is really an interesting thing that you can only do when the data is put into a table. And what it does is it looks for records that have been duplicated. Now, you have to tell it, well, what are you looking for? Well, I'm going to say if everything is exactly matched, meaning every date, injury, gender, all the fields are exactly matched, I want to remove it. So I click on OK, and there's no duplicate values found, which is good. That means that no one has entered in two records of the same. But just for exercise sakes here, let's just go up here. And let's say I take this row right there, and I just copy it down, although I want to copy it as an absolute. So that would be by holding the control key and dragging it down. Now, if I go back in to look at duplicate records and I say, okay, let's have a look. It took one duplicate record was found, and we're back to 514 unique values. So this is a really nice feature because it can look for redundancy data that was entered in too much. It's a way of cleaning the data, you might say. Now, you can also use it to extract data that you don't want. So I use this quite often. Let's say I want to pull out all of the males, for example. I could say, let's remove everybody who has the gender that's the same. Now, I got to see if this is going to work on this one. Okay. And it pulls everything out. So there was everything was pulled out because there's there's males and females, so there's only one left in the end. All right, let's see if I can undo that. Good thing I could undo that because I would have lost all my data. Anyway, it's a way of pulling out individual records that you don't want. Like, for example, I want to take out all of the ones that say that, it's not available, like NA. If it's not NA, like NA doesn't have a very incident type. So if that's the case, I may not want that record. I could extract the record, or I might pull out every record that has an incident cost of 0, because I don't really care about the information if it didn't cost us anything. I'm just looking at the data that cost us something. So this is, or I'm looking for just people who are on Fridays, for example, or just a particular month. So the ability to extract or remove data can be used not just for duplicating records, but pulling out records that you don't want in the data set. This is a great feature, because a lot of times when you have these large data sets, there'll be certain records in here that you may not want, and you can use this feature to help extract the data. All right, well, I'm on the topic of extracting data. I'm also talking about looking at the data to see if there's any anomalies. Now, anomalies are things that are difficult to pick up if you don't know how the individual data is structured. But one anomaly here in this data set was that this record right here is missing. So the age group of this, they didn't enter it in. They made a mistake. They didn't type it in properly. And that happens. So what we could do is we can actually do this in a variety of different ways. We could actually just sort the data. And if we sorted the data, that would actually tell us, probably where that record was. And you can see here, I just sorted it. It didn't work. So I was just lucky it was in the top portion here. But is there any more? If I go hit the end key and I drop down, nope, that's all the data's there. So what I can do is I can use what they call a conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is such a fantastic tool. I've got to show you how this works. And basically, you can apply a condition. Like you can say that if there's anything that's a blank in here, so I can highlight all the data in here. Or I could actually highlight all the data through the entire data set. In fact, why don't we do that? Why don't we just go back up here, and I'll go back in the table design, click on the table, and let's just apply this to everything. So I'll go right across and all the way down. So my first conditional format I'm going to set up here is to look for empty cells. So I've got everything highlighted. Now I'm going to go back into my Home tab, and in my Home tab, click on Conditional Formatting. So conditional formatting means when you've got your own particular rule. So I'm looking for something that, if a cell contains nothing, I want to know what that is. So I could say if a cell is greater than or less than or between or equal to or contains a particular text. So if I could say, does it contain what? Then I can make it, if it contains the letter, if it contains a 0, for example. If it contains a 0, everything that contains 0 highlights. Now, you're wondering why the 50 plus. Well, 50 plus is actually a non-value, so it's showing as that. If I was to type in, let's say, 100, that'd be pretty rare. It's very specific. All right. If it contains Saturday or SAT, it shows SAT. So what conditional formatting does, it allows you to come up with whatever you're looking for to find it with visual cues. Great tool. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a conditional format by creating a rule. And I'm just trying to remember the rule is it creating a new rule that would be a blank. So what I'm doing now is this is actually a conditional format for managing my own rules, or create a new rule if I want. So I can create a new rule and be very specific what I want to do with that rule. Cells that only contain a blank. Look at how detailed you can get. And if I want just the blanks, I can format it to say I want that fill to be red, let's say. That's pretty obvious. And I click on OK. And that means that anytime there's a blank, it will show in red. Now, if data even changes, for example, I take the word burnout and I delete it, it goes red. So that means that there is a condition on all the data anywhere in here that if anything changes with inside the table, it's going to turn red. This is a really helpful feature. For example, I could do this entire column, say that anything that's greater than 0, I want to show as red. So let's do that. Let's go up here and say anything that is greater than 0, I want it to show as red. Now, I highlighted the entire column, so of course it also did that. But let me I'd have to go in and just highlight all of the data, because the rules get applied to whatever is highlighted. So let's say I highlight all the data here, conditional format, anything that is greater than 0. So everything is greater than 0 costs money. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So if this goes up, let's say I put in $12, it goes red too. Everything that's in red has money. If I put a 0 back in there, it doesn't cost me money. It's all good. So this is a visual cue for people to look at the data. If it's red, why is it red? Well, it's costing us money. And we could come up with all sorts of rules that we want. Another really neat feature is to visually display the value as a graph within inside of the cell. It's almost like a graphing tool. So I'm going to take all the data in here, all the values, I'm going to highlight them. I'm going to go back to conditional formatting, and I'm going to go to what they call data bars. And what data bars is going to do is it's going to allow me to visually show me how much money in proportion to all the other data that's been selected. All right, so that means that you'll see here that there's a bar now. It's like a bar chart. This one here, 4,872, is almost the maximum, largest amount of cost. So this one really cost a lot of money. So not only does the red show the costs, but the data bar now shows me how extreme the cost was with a visual cue. I don't have to look at the number and then quantify it in my own mind. This helps me organize it. So again, this is helping whoever's looking at the data interpret the data by using these tools. All right, let's move on to how we can add fields within a table. So the fields are, of course, the blue row at the top here. So let's say I want to find out the day of the week. I want to add that as a new field here. So I did this already, but let's do it again, this time inside of a table. So I'm going to right click on the column L. I'm going to go insert, and it automatically applies the existing conditional format. So I don't want those. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to go back and I'm going to highlight everything here. And I'm going to say, oops, under editing, I want to clear out everything that has to do with the formatting. There we go. So there's no more formatting in here. All right. Now, if I was to create a function in here, like equal to the month bracket, we just looked at that one. I want to find out what month this is. We know it's the first month, it's January. And I click on this one over here. You'll notice that it puts in the square bracket at the date because it's actually interpreting the entire field. When you create a new function within a table, a new formula inside of a table, it uses the title of the field inside the calculation. So rather than calling it A3, it's actually looking at the entire field. So when I push enter, it readjusts for the entire table. So it automatically updates. This is a very helpful feature, and it allows us to write our more advanced formulas. So when you write functions or formulas inside of a table, you have to refer to the actual field instead of the actual cell. Very important distinction between the two. All right, well, that's a kind of pretty good overview of how a table can help manipulate your data. And from here, some people just leave tables in this state, but what you should do is return the table back to the worksheet. Remember, the table is an object sitting on top, which is almost like lifting it directly off. But what we want to do is go back up into the table design, and we want to convert the table back to the range on the spreadsheet. So when I do that, it says, do you want to convert the table to a normal range? And I say yes. What that does is it leaves everything in place. It just removes the table. So now we no longer have a table tool. We can't address the table, but everything else is still here in the end. Okay, the conditional formats are still there, as you can see, as I'm typing in some data right here. All right, let's remove the extra one we did here. And let's go in and have a look at how we can manipulate now more data and answer some of those questions. So what I've done is I've come up with some of the answers that I've worked on. So some of the questions that I came up with were, how many men work at this company compared to women? Like, you always hear the statistics, about men and women and the work gap or whatever. So what is the number here? So what I've done is I've come up with a way of how to calculate the data. Now, to calculate this data, we will have to leave this back in the table. So I guess what you want to do is actually, we're going to go back and put this back into the table. So let's go back to A2, insert a table, and let's make sure it is the correct one here. Select OK, and we're good to go. All right, from here, I want to find out, is it male or is it female? And who is more? What are the numbers? Now, I could just sort this, right? I could go back up here and sort all the females. I could scroll down all the females, and I could come up with the answer and say, okay, the females are 56. Okay, so I could go females are 56, and the males are plus 1, 2, 4 minus this, and do a calculation. And I could come up with the answer by just manually doing it. But that wouldn't work if I was going to actually change the data in the future. So this would not be a recommended way. What I'm going to do is use a formula to do this. So the formula that I want, and I'll just show you mine, is by counting records that meet a condition. And the name of the function is called COUNTIF. So it's not just counting up all the males, it's counting if it's a particular gender. So how it works is you're going to go in here and say count if, and you're going to go to the safety data. Well, I called it safety data 3, which is the name of that table. I'm going to pick the field here called gender, and I'm going to select R4 as my condition if it's male. All right, so let's go back to our example and let's try that. All right, so I'm going to go back here and say equal to, let's count if bracket, and what is the range? Well, the range would be all of this data right here. So if I go back down, and you could do this in, again, there's slightly different ways of doing this. I can go back and highlight it. I can put the range in like this, comma. And what is the criteria? The criteria is if it's male. And there's the answer. So I'm showing two separate ways of doing this. This is one if it's in a table like this. Or let's see if I could do another way. Count if the range is gender and the condition is female. Nope, and that didn't work. So the way I've got this set up right now, because of this table, that didn't work. So what I could probably do is copy this down and then slightly modify it. So this would be 3, and this would be 6, and there we go. And if you want to make sure that that's correct, all we could do is sum it up, and we know it's supposed to be 514 records, so we're good to go. So that's an example of how we can use the count, but with a condition statement. It's called count if. Count everything within a range if it meets a criteria, and this criteria is male. In that case, this would be for female. So the question was, what is the gender breakdown? And there it is right there. There's your answer. All right, let's look at another question. Another question is by group. The groups are right here. Those are the 4 groups that there are. Employees between 18 to 24 and so on. And then which group has the most number of employees? Well, again, we're going to count. And in this case right here, well, let me undo that. We are going to count if the safety data, and that's the name of this table, and the field here called age group, and we're going to count if it's within the 18 to 24. And there it is. There's 106 records that are between that group. What does this tell us? It tells us that most of our employees are between the ages of 25 to 34. Now, why is it green? Well, it's green because I put on a conditional format here to say that the maximum number in here has to be green. So I put a conditional format in here. Now, another question is, what did it cost us? How much did this group cost us? Well, that's a question that we can answer by doing another function called let's sum up if it meets our criteria. So in this case, we're going to use a function here called sum if. So let's sum up if our table, our age group, is equal to 18 to 24, and then let's add up from the table the incident cost, and let's sum that up. And our answer is $137,249. What does that tell us? It tells us that that age group, well, primarily because they've got more people, that's the group we should be focusing on for sending out safety messages for sure. Also, I carried this on and asked another question. Well, how many days did we lose? And it looks like that this group is also the highest. Now we could do ratios and actually calculate ratios here as well, but I thought that's probably enough. I just wanted to give you an example here of using a function here called sum if. Sum if a particular range meets a condition, what is the sum of that condition? And I carry on with the same kind of logic here. What I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, let's find out what incidents caused the most. So this was a great one right here. This tells me right away when management looks at this, they say, oh, the incident type were burns. More people had burns at work than car accidents, cutting, etc. So if I was the manager, I'd say, well, why are so many people getting burnt? Should we be wearing safety gloves? Should we be wearing eye protection? Should we have more training for vehicles? We got to cut these numbers down. And it directs me right to this one right here called burns. So it looks like that we got to talk to males in this age group about burns, and that would be the priority. So if we're summarizing this and we're trying to come up with it's trying to paint a story, and that's what I'm doing here is I'm trying to paint a story that explains that we need to send a message out to the males in the 25 to 34-year-old group to talk to them about burns, specifically in what state? Florida. For some reason, Florida's got a huge number of people in that age group that are getting burnt. We can also break it down by department. So each of these can be broken down in what department they're in. And it says here that the maintenance department has the highest incidence. Well, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Like security guards, how often do they get hurt? They're walking around, sitting a lot. But the people in the maintenance group getting out there and actually climbing ladders and fixing light bulbs, they get hurt more. That kind of makes sense. All right, and then another one I did here was plants. Which one has the largest? And again, I'm reusing this function of summing if to do that. I then went through and did a ratio calculation as well in case the numbers didn't make sense. So I wanted to divide. You can see here the calculation is right here. Taking the individual amount and dividing it by the sum of the absolute range and then copying it down. Okay, report time, lost time first aid. Claims, again, lost time was the largest. Which day of the week? It turned out to be, surprise, surprise, Fridays. Probably people aren't really focusing on their job as much. They're thinking about Friday night, and maybe they're getting hurt more, which kind of makes sense, doesn't it? What type of injuries? Okay, this is another good one. Back injuries. So maybe implement, everybody has to wear those back braces. I know that Home Depot did this. In fact, if you guys ever go to Home Depot, you'll see that a lot of those people at Home Depot have back braces on. And, you know, it's probably coming out of some kind of analysis like this. And so in the end, you know, what I'm trying to get across here is that data in its early form, like this, that I originally showed, can come up and answer and paint a picture. So what I really want you to do is really think about this and see if you can come up with even more ideas and write some of these formulas. And that's what employers want. They want people that can look at data, they can think about the questions, they can answer those questions using functions and formulas, and then they can tell a story. I mean, it sounds kind of funny that, you know, the data doesn't tell a story. It clearly, when you start looking at this, it starts to tell a story. So it evolves. It evolves from the raw data at the top. It comes to the next stage, which is developing the information in Excel. And then finally, it paints a picture of the story. So what's left? The end of the road. The last thing that you can do with this analysis is come up with recommendations. So the recommendations might be to reduce the costs. How can we do that? Well, we could do it by training, specifically training in particular areas, training towards maybe make sure the males know what the training is in that particular age group with a particular incident at a particular plant regarding certain types of injuries, because we want to reduce those numbers. So what this is going to do in the end for management, it's going to help them develop policies and procedures to make their company more profit. And that's really what it's all about. It's, in the end, isn't it always about just trying to make more money? But that's what companies want. They want you to take this information here and develop a story. So I hope that this painted a picture for you guys. I'm almost at my 1 hour maximum here that I'm trying to target. So I hope that makes sense. And that's it for this week's lecture. I hope you guys go through. Make sure that you go through all of your learning resources. Okay, your learning resources are, of course, the e-textbook. Watch the PowerPoint. Watch the videos. They've got some sample data files for the exercises. Do the simulation. Get your assignment in from last week. And, of course, quiz number 3 for chapter number 3 is due this week as well. All right, so that's it for this week, and I will see you guys next week.